has confirmed it's launched an attack on Iran.
At 2:17 in the morning, radar screens across one of the most heavily guarded regions on Earth lit up almost simultaneously. What commanders first believed to be a technical malfunction quickly revealed something far more alarming. Multiple fast-moving objects were approaching Allied military positions from different directions at once, flying low, coordinated, and timed with near-perfect precision. Within seconds, alarms echoed through command centers, pilots were rushed toward aircraft, and air defense operators faced decisions that would shape the next hours of global history. What happened that night was not a single strike, but a carefully synchronized operation designed to overwhelm defenses before a response could even be organized. Intelligence analysts later suggested that the attack pattern had been rehearsed digitally for months, possibly years, using simulations capable of predicting human reaction times inside real command structures. Some targets were obvious strategic locations. Others made no sense at first glance, raising a chilling possibility. The objective was confusion itself. As interceptor missiles launched into the darkness, streaks of light crossed the sky in every direction. Satellite communications briefly fluctuated. Reports from forward bases described electronic interference strong enough to disrupt navigation systems. For several tense minutes, commanders could not confirm whether they were facing drones, ballistic threats, or something entirely new. Every incoming signal forced split-second judgments: engage, wait, or risk catastrophic impact. Allied forces moved into defensive formation faster than many experts believed possible. Fighter jets lifted off under emergency protocols, while naval units repositioned to shield vulnerable installations. Behind the scenes, encrypted communication channels connected multiple nations in real time, creating a battlefield that stretched across land, sea, air, and cyberspace simultaneously. This was no longer a localized confrontation. It was a test of modern warfare itself. Eyewitness accounts from personnel on the ground describe a battle fought as much through algorithms as weapons. Automated defense networks selected targets faster than human operators could speak, while commanders struggled to determine whether the attack represented retaliation, escalation, or the opening phase of something much larger. Every intercepted projectile bought time, but also raised a terrifying question. Was this only the first wave? Then came the moment that stunned observers worldwide. Just as defenses appeared to stabilize, unexpected maneuvers forced Allied forces to rethink everything they believed about the unfolding battle. Strategic assumptions collapsed in real time, revealing how fragile regional stability had truly become. Military analysts watching remotely realized that the rules governing past conflicts might no longer apply. In today's video, we reconstruct the sequence of events minute by minute, examining how the clash unfolded, how close commanders came to losing control of the situation, and why this confrontation may mark a turning point in modern military strategy. Because sometimes, history doesn't begin with a declaration of war. Sometimes it begins with a single alert on a radar screen, and the realization that the world has already changed. The battle began without a formal declaration, without warning speeches or visible troop movements that traditionally signal the start of open conflict. In the early hours before dawn, when operational activity at most forward bases typically shifts into routine monitoring mode, surveillance systems detected unusual aerial movement along several contested corridors of airspace. At first, analysts believed the signals were linked to routine reconnaissance drones or regional military exercises, something common in an area long defined by tension and constant strategic posturing. However, within minutes, the pattern changed dramatically. Multiple radar installations operated by Allied forces began tracking dozens of fast-moving objects entering monitored zones almost simultaneously from different vectors. Their flight paths were unusually disciplined, maintaining low altitudes designed to reduce detection time. According to later military briefings, some of the incoming projectiles appeared to follow terrain masking routes, a tactic widely documented in modern missile doctrine and previously observed in conflicts involving precision-guided systems. Air defense operators quickly realized that this was not an isolated incident, but a coordinated strike intended to pressure defensive networks across several locations at once. Personnel stationed at one of the largest regional bases reported that warning sirens activated approximately 40 seconds after the first confirmed detection, significantly faster than standard response timelines. Automated defense platforms immediately switched from passive monitoring to engagement readiness. Patriot and short-range interception systems were placed on active targeting mode, while command staff initiated emergency communication protocols linking nearby installations and naval assets operating offshore. The speed of escalation suggested that attackers were attempting to exploit the narrow window between identification and interception, a vulnerability long discussed in military planning circles. Witness accounts later described the sky filling with intersecting trails of interceptor missiles moments after authorization was granted. Defensive launches occurred in rapid succession, creating overlapping engagement zones meant to prevent saturation of any single system. Military experts noted that modern attacks increasingly rely on overwhelming defenses through simultaneous threats rather than sheer destructive power, forcing defenders to divide attention and resources. Early reports indicated that several incoming targets were neutralized before reaching critical infrastructure, though debris impacts were recorded in peripheral areas surrounding the installations. At nearly the same time, electronic interference began affecting communication channels. Operators experienced brief disruptions in drone feeds and satellite positioning signals, complicating real-time threat assessment. While electronic warfare capabilities are widely known to accompany modern military operations, internal sources later claimed that the level of signal disruption exceeded previous encounters in the region. Some analysts suggested the interference may have originated from mobile platforms positioned closer to the battlefield than initially believed, hinting at a deeper level of preparation behind the assault. One particularly striking moment occurred when base commanders received conflicting trajectory data, suggesting an additional wave approaching from an unexpected direction. For nearly 3 minutes, uncertainty spread through command networks as personnel attempted to verify whether new contacts represented genuine threats or decoy signals designed to trigger unnecessary interceptions. Retired officers reviewing the incident later argued that such confusion aligned with emerging doctrines emphasizing psychological pressure alongside kinetic attacks. Ground units moved quickly to reinforced positions, while aircraft crews prepared for emergency launch authorization. Several fighter jets reportedly taxied toward runways under blackout conditions to reduce visibility from aerial surveillance. Though official confirmations remain limited, unofficial accounts claim that at least one incoming object altered course mid-flight after defensive engagement, fueling speculation that adaptive guidance technology may have been used during the attack, a capability still debated among defense analysts. Within less than 10 minutes, what began as uncertain radar activity had evolved into a full defensive battle, involving air defense crews, pilots, naval coordination teams, and cyber specialists working simultaneously. The opening phase of the confrontation demonstrated how modern warfare can ignite almost instantly, transforming routine monitoring into active combat before political leadership or global observers fully grasp what is unfolding. By the time the first situation reports reached international news agencies, the battle was already underway, and the region had crossed a threshold from tension into open confrontation. The first confirmation that the attack was intentional came only minutes after the initial defensive interceptions began. Intelligence officers monitoring regional communications intercepted fragments of encrypted transmissions believed to originate from units linked to Iranian military command structures. While early analysis remained cautious, the scale and coordination of the strikes quickly pointed toward a state-level operation, rather than the actions of proxy groups that had historically carried out limited attacks in the region. What distinguished this moment from previous incidents was the synchronization. Multiple Allied installations were targeted within the same operational window, suggesting centralized planning and precise timing. According to later defense assessments, the attack appeared to combine several known elements of Iranian military doctrine developed over the past 2 decades. Iran has long invested in asymmetric capabilities, particularly ballistic and cruise missiles, armed drones, and electronic warfare systems designed to counter technologically superior opponents. Analysts noted similarities between the strike patterns and large-scale exercises conducted by Iranian forces in recent years, where simultaneous launches were used to simulate overwhelming advanced air defense networks. In this case, incoming threats reportedly included a mixture of medium-range projectiles and low-flying unmanned aerial vehicles intended to complicate interception priorities. Operators at one forward radar station initially counted fewer than 10 incoming objects, but updated tracking data soon expanded that number significantly as additional launches were detected from separate locations. Some trajectories appeared to originate from coastal launch zones, while others were traced back to inland mobile platforms capable of rapid relocation after firing. Military experts later explained that mobile launch systems have become a central feature of modern missile strategy because they reduce vulnerability to immediate retaliation. Satellite imagery reviewed after the event allegedly showed several launch vehicles dispersing within minutes, disappearing into pre-prepared concealment areas. At approximately the same time, Allied naval forces stationed in nearby waters reported detecting drone swarms approaching at varying altitudes. These unmanned systems moved slower than missile threats, but forced defensive crews to divide attention between high-speed intercepts and persistent aerial targets capable of surveillance or secondary strikes. One naval officer later described the situation as fighting layers of threats at once, where each interception decision carried strategic consequences. Real-world conflicts in recent years have demonstrated how relatively inexpensive drones can challenge advanced militaries, and the battle appeared to reflect this evolving reality. Adding to the confusion were reports of decoy signals mimicking ballistic signatures. Defense analysts believe some incoming objects were intentionally designed to trigger radar responses without carrying significant payloads, exhausting interceptor inventories, and creating uncertainty about which threats were genuine. Such tactics align with publicly documented military strategies emphasizing saturation attacks, where success depends not only on impact, but on forcing defenders into resource depletion. During the height of the engagement, command centers reportedly struggled to maintain a clear operational picture as dozens of tracks appeared and disappeared across monitoring systems. Unconfirmed intelligence leaks later claimed that several attacks were aimed less at destruction and more at testing response times across Allied command networks. According to these sources, timing intervals between launch waves matched previously observed reaction benchmarks used in military simulations. While officials have neither confirmed nor denied these claims, the idea reinforced concerns that the operation served both tactical and strategic purposes, delivering a message while gathering battlefield data. Ground personnel described distant flashes along the horizon as interceptions occurred far beyond base perimeters. Shockwaves from mid-air explosions were felt seconds later, reinforcing the realization that the confrontation had moved beyond isolated hostility into direct engagement between organized military forces. Emergency medical teams were placed on standby, and hardened shelters filled with non-essential personnel as commanders prepared for potential follow-up strikes. Within less than 15 minutes from the first confirmed launch detections, Allied intelligence agencies formally assessed that the coordinated attacks were linked to Iranian forces or affiliated command structures. That assessment marked a decisive turning point. What had begun as an unfolding defensive emergency now carried geopolitical implications capable of triggering wider escalation. The battlefield was no longer defined solely by incoming threats, but by the growing awareness that every defensive action could shape the next phase of an international crisis already accelerating beyond anyone's expectations. As the scale of the attack became fully understood, the battle entered its most intense phase, shifting from immediate interception to sustained defensive combat. Air defense crews, who had already engaged the first waves, were forced to rapidly recalibrate their systems as new threat profiles emerged. Commanders understood that surviving the opening minutes did not guarantee safety. Historically, coordinated strikes are often followed by secondary attacks designed to exploit weakened defenses. Operators began redistributing interceptor coverage, prioritizing fuel depots, communication hubs, and aircraft shelters rather than perimeter structures. This decision reflected real-world military doctrine, where preserving operational capability takes precedence over protecting infrastructure once combat begins. Inside command bunkers, officers worked alongside automated targeting systems that continuously processed battlefield data from airborne warning aircraft, naval sensors, and ground-based radar networks. Modern warfare increasingly depends on data fusion, allowing multiple nations to share targeting information almost instantly. During this engagement, Allied forces reportedly relied on a joint operational network linking several regional commands into a single defensive grid. Pilots awaiting launch orders received updated threat maps directly through cockpit displays before engines were even fully powered, drastically reducing reaction time compared to earlier generations of air combat. Fighter squadrons soon entered the battle not to pursue enemy aircraft, but to extend defensive reach beyond fixed installations. Combat air patrols formed overlapping circles above strategic corridors, prepared to intercept airborne threats that evaded ground systems. Several pilots later described the sky as unusually crowded with defensive activity, as airborne radar platforms coordinated interception zones to prevent friendly fire incidents. Real combat situations often demand strict airspace management, and controllers reportedly issued continuous course adjustments to maintain separation between interceptors, surveillance aircraft, and refueling tankers operating under combat conditions. Meanwhile, ground units adapted to the evolving fight by implementing dispersal protocols. Vehicles and mobile command elements relocated away from predictable positions, reducing vulnerability to follow-up targeting. Military planners have long emphasized mobility as a defense against precision-guided weapons, and the rapid movement of personnel during the battle demonstrated extensive prior preparation. Engineering teams reinforced protective barriers while damage control crews responded to minor impacts caused by falling debris from earlier interceptions. Even small disruptions threatened operational continuity, making logistical coordination as critical as combat performance. Coordination between Allied forces became one of the defining elements of the engagement. Naval vessels positioned offshore integrated their radar coverage with land-based systems, effectively extending detection ranges across maritime approaches. Destroyers equipped with missile defense capabilities reportedly intercepted several incoming threats at distances far beyond coastal installations, preventing saturation closer to populated zones. Communication between sea and land commands occurred through encrypted channels designed specifically for multinational operations, highlighting years of joint training exercises that suddenly transitioned from simulation into reality. At the same time, cyber defense teams confronted a parallel struggle unfolding behind the visible battle. Network irregularities suggested attempts to overload command servers responsible for distributing targeting information. Although disruptions remained limited, specialists initiated isolation procedures to prevent malware infiltration into operational systems. Military analysts have repeatedly warned that future conflicts would merge physical and digital battlefields, and during this confrontation, technicians worked under pressure equal to that faced by personnel operating missile batteries or aircraft. Maintaining reliable communication proved essential, as even seconds of delay could alter interception outcomes. As defensive stability gradually improved, commanders faced the difficult decision of whether to initiate a measured response. International military doctrine generally emphasizes proportional reaction during rapidly escalating crises, balancing deterrence with the risk of uncontrolled expansion. Intelligence updates indicated that launch activity had slowed but not ceased entirely, raising fears that additional strikes might still be underway. Strategic planners evaluated potential response options, ranging from reconnaissance flights to limited precision actions aimed at preventing further attacks. Preparations for retaliation began cautiously. Strike aircraft were armed, but held under conditional authorization pending political approval, reflecting the complex chain of command governing multinational operations. Surveillance drones expanded patrol zones to identify potential launch areas without immediately escalating hostilities. According to later accounts, commanders prioritized demonstrating readiness rather than immediate offensive action, hoping to deter further aggression while avoiding miscalculation. During this period, tension inside operational centers reportedly reached its peak. Personnel had been working continuously since the first alerts, managing exhaustion while processing a constant flow of intelligence updates. Medical teams monitored stress levels among key operators, rotating crews whenever possible to maintain decision-making accuracy. Studies of real combat environments show that fatigue significantly affects reaction time, and leadership appeared determined to prevent human error from undermining defensive success. Unexpected developments briefly reignited fears of escalation when sensors detected high-speed movement near regional airspace boundaries. For several minutes, uncertainty returned as analysts struggled to classify the contacts. Some feared the arrival of additional hostile assets, while others suspected reconnaissance activity intended to gauge Allied readiness after the initial clash. Defensive formations tightened once more, illustrating how quickly battlefield momentum could shift even after apparent stabilization. Eventually, coordinated assessments across Allied commands concluded that the immediate phase of the attack was subsiding. Interceptor launch rates decreased, emergency response teams transitioned from combat posture to controlled monitoring, and aircraft began returning for refueling and system checks. Yet despite the reduction in active threats, no commander declared the battle truly over. Military doctrine recognizes that modern engagements often unfold in cycles, with pauses masking preparation for renewed confrontation. The combined defensive actions, multinational coordination, and restrained preparation for response demonstrated how contemporary warfare operates under constant uncertainty. Every movement during the battle balanced tactical survival with strategic consequence. Decisions made within minutes carried implications far beyond the battlefield itself, influencing diplomatic channels, alliance commitments, and global security calculations. By the time operational tempo slowed, Allied forces had successfully defended critical positions while signaling their capacity to respond if necessary. But the confrontation left commanders aware that the line between defense and escalation had grown dangerously thin. By the time the final interception alerts faded from operational screens, the immediate fighting had ended. But the consequences of the confrontation were only beginning to unfold. Military commanders conducted rapid damage assessments across multiple installations, confirming that while critical infrastructure remained operational, the psychological impact of the battle had been profound. Analysts later noted that the true outcome of the clash was not measured solely in physical destruction, but in how close the region had come to uncontrolled escalation between major powers. Preliminary reports indicated limited structural damage compared to the scale of the attack, largely due to the effectiveness of layered defense systems and coordinated multinational response efforts mentioned earlier. However, several secondary facilities experienced operational disruptions caused by shockwaves, falling debris, and emergency shutdown procedures triggered during the engagement. Air operations in surrounding zones were temporarily suspended, commercial flight paths rerouted, and maritime traffic slowed as authorities attempted to ensure that no delayed threats remained active. Such precautionary measures are consistent with real-world military responses following high-intensity incidents, where uncertainty often persists long after combat ceases. What drew global attention most strongly was the speed at which diplomatic channels activated. Within hours, emergency consultations reportedly took place between defense ministers and international organizations seeking to prevent retaliation from expanding into a broader conflict. Intelligence agencies warned that even a limited counterstrike could trigger chain reactions involving regional allies and proxy forces. Financial markets reacted almost immediately, with energy prices experiencing sudden fluctuations amid fears of supply disruption, a recurring pattern whenever instability threatens strategically important regions.